Hello and welcome to Newbie Debate. Today we're going to be talking about argument components. What I mean by that is what are the components that make up a lot of different arguments that we make in debate, either implicitly or explicitly. Um, so the four main parts of an argument are the uniqueness, the link, the internal link, and the impact. We'll go ahead and go through all of these individually. Some arguments directly use this terminology, and others just rely on the general existence of it without specifically identifying it. Let's go ahead and talk about that. So, uniqueness is like inherency, it's a question of what's happening now. Uniqueness is where you make claims about the way things are now. The term comes because you're trying to prove that a bad thing or a good thing is unique and would not happen otherwise. Like if you make an argument that this thing happens as a result of doing the plan, but that thing that was bad, it was going to happen regardless of whether or not we do the plan. It's not reasonable to apply that as a unique reason why the plan is bad, because that effect was going to happen regardless of whether or not we do the plan. So it's not a reason why the plan shouldn't be done. Next is the link. The link is about what changes about the uniqueness or about what's happening now. For example, in the disadvantage, the link is where you argue why the affirmative does something that causes the uniqueness to change in a way that's bad. Like the uniqueness in a disadvantage against the affirmative case would argue that things are good now. If we do nothing, things are going to be fine. But then the link argues that doing the AF is what causes the uniqueness to change into something bad. So it's their goal to prove that we will be fine if we do nothing, but we will be harmed if we do the plan. So there's a unique harm to the plan. The internal link is the in-between to the link and the impact. The internal link is something that's caused by the change to the status quo that typically is not the largest thing. It's not the biggest possible issue, because that biggest possible issue is known as the impact. Sometimes you'll have an internal link and other times you won't. It's kind of just a part two of the link if the story that you're trying to tell needs it. The impact is the major bad or the bad thing that is caused or the good thing that's prevented. So the impact is the final thing on this chain of arguments, because these all kind of chain into each other. It's in this order too. It would be uniqueness, link, internal link, impact. But it's the final thing that happens on this chain. So for example, the affirmative increases disease spread would be an internal link, but then disease spread causes extinction would be the impact to disease. What is the impact to disease is extinction. If diseases spread, we might all die to a pandemic. And so that's an example of the four components in principle, specifically the impact in that situation. So uniqueness is a question of how things are currently. We already talked about that. It's a descriptive of how things are and gives examples to justify why that's the case. Like in uniqueness, you might say, here's the way things are, and here's some proof that I'm right about that, usually through some kind of evidence or something along those lines. The reason why you need uniqueness for your arguments is so that you can prove that the bad thing your opponents do, the link, causes something bad to happen, the impact that wouldn't happen otherwise, like we said earlier. If you have the link and the impact, but you don't win uniqueness, all that you've proven is that they might contribute to something bad that was already going to happen anyway. The only workaround here is if you're able to prove that your impacts are linear, which means they contribute to something that makes it meaningfully worse. Like if the example on this slide is mining versus nuclear war, if the plan causes an increase in mineral mining that maybe has an impact on the health of the people that have to mine those minerals or an environmental impact, those are things that having more mining would be tangibly worse. Like if we had 2 mining and then we went to 3 mining, the increase from 2 to 3 is noticeable, and it matters because that's a bunch more people that could have not been suffering that do now have to suffer. But if we go from 1 nuclear war to 2 nuclear wars, I mean, there's a really realistic possibility that one nuclear war was going to be big enough no matter what. And so causing a second nuclear war probably doesn't matter as much because of the impacts of nuclear war being so disastrous and ultimate that having a second nuclear war after you've already had one probably isn't that relevant. So yeah, that's an example of a linear impact, linear being the mining in this case, and a brink impact being nuclear war, something that once it happens once, it's kind of already cooked. On the link is where you prove that your opponents and or their plan did or will do something that changes the way things are, aka the uniqueness. The link should be as particular as possible to the situation at hand. Your affirmative might read a plan, and if you have a link that's generic to the resolution, that's good, but it's even better to have a link to the specific action that they do. Then the impact is the final argument component. It's the final question where we ask, why does this matter? So earlier, I guess I missed this, but we'll go ahead and just do it now. If you argued on the uniqueness that the economy is fine now, but it's fragile, and then the link, so that was the uniqueness, the link is that the plan harms the economy. We kind of talked about this in an earlier lecture, if you're following along with all of them in order. But the link is that the plan harms the economy, and then that harming the economy leads to economic collapse is the internal link, and then economic collapse causes nuclear war is the impact. So in this instance, the impact is why making the economy worse is bad. That's the internal link and the impact. The internal link being that making the economy worse causes collapse of the economy. The collapse of the economy is bad because it causes nuclear war. Typically, an impact will deal with some large issue, whether it be diseases, nuclear war, climate change, poverty, starvation, or some other really big bad thing caused by the unique change to the status quo. So the internal link, we already talked about this. It's the bridge to the gap about economic collapse to nuclear war. In adding an internal link, because let's say we didn't do that. Let's say we went from the plan harms the economy, and then we went from harming the economy causes nuclear war. That wouldn't make a ton of sense, but adding in the internal link that harming the economy causes economic collapse, and the economic collapse causes nuclear war adds that little buffer in between those two arguments that makes it a lot more believable. And in a world where we're trying to convince people that our arguments are true, having things be more believable is pretty persuasive. So what does this look like? Some people will read these and they'll point out each one. They'll say like uniqueness, and they'll make the uniqueness argument, link, and they'll make their link argument. But in some cases, and oftentimes this is kind of what people are gravitating towards, and what you'll probably see is they will just make these arguments and they won't identify them for you. So it's really important that we understand what uniqueness, link, internal link, and impacts are, so that we're able to see them and identify them when we find ourselves in debates. Responding with this in mind. So anytime they're making an argument, you can attack any aspect of it. On uniqueness, you can ask the question, are there other things that cause this / is this already happening? On the link, you can ask yourselves, do you actually cause this change in the status quo? Or alternatively, can you provide proof of why you actually move things in a more positive direction? Like if they say the economy's fragile, the AF hurts the economy, maybe you can argue why you actually make the economy better. On the internal link / impact, ask yourself if this is already happening. And if it is already happening, does it matter that there's more of it? You can make defensive arguments that argue why the impact that they talk about won't actually be as bad as they say it is, so that you can leverage that against the bad, or if you're on the affirmative, the good things that you say you cause. So you might hear these be called the chain or the link chain. because they act as though they're chained together. Uniqueness, link, internal link, impact, they lead one into the other. When you view the arguments like this, you're able to see all these micro arguments, like we called them in a previous lecture, and compartmentalize them and understand that they need all of these in order to function. Remember, the goal of policy debate is to win the big arguments that connect back to the ballot. In too many situations, novices will overfocus on smaller issues that will result in them not winning the debate, even in the best case of scenarios. So for example, if we wanted to look at this as a big picture issue, they need the link in order for the uniqueness, the internal link, and the impact to matter. We could try to focus on the niche little mini issues. Like we want to win every argument on uniqueness. We want to win every argument on the link, internal link, impact, etc. But if we're really liking the arguments we're making on the link, if we're able to win these arguments, we take out the entire disadvantage. It's an example of looking at it on the bigger picture rather than focusing on, I want to win every little argument. And being able to identify those things makes it a lot easier to debate. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this made sense. We'll try to extrapolate how this applies to maybe some other arguments that aren't disadvantages, because I think that a lot of these concepts are pretty foundational to the way we make arguments, because we're trying to prove the resolution true, so we need uniqueness, etc. Applies to the rest of them too. But yeah, we'll go into more detail on that in future lectures. Thank you so much for watching this one, and I will see you next time.